Money is moving toward you right now. Listen and let it. Neville Goddard taught that the whole outer world is nothing but the furniture of your own imagination, rearranged for you to see. And tonight that teaching turns toward the very thing you have been almost ashamed to admit you think about, which is money, the rent, the debt, the number in the account that never seems to move the way you need it to move. And if you have ever lain awake doing arithmetic in the dark, you are not alone in that. You are simply a person who has been taught to watch the world for evidence instead of watching your own imagination for the cause. There is an old line tucked inside the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 1, and it reads, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." And Neville Goddard read that verse the way he read every line of Scripture, not as ancient history but as a private psychological instruction addressed to you this morning in your own kitchen, and he would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it?" The verse does not say faith is the hope for a thing. It says faith is the substance, meaning the actual stuff, the actual material of the thing you are hoping for, which means before the check arrives, before the door opens, before the number changes, the substance of that money already exists, fully formed, in the unseen, waiting only for you to occupy it as a feeling rather than chase it as an object. And that is the whole quiet scandal of this teaching. The money is not something you go out and get. It is a state you learn to live in. Say it with me. I am the one for whom money moves easily. I am the one who already carries the feeling of having more than enough. Imagination creates my reality. And again, I am the one for whom money moves easily. I am the one who already carries the feeling of having more than enough. Imagination creates my reality. Now, if something in you went quiet just now, if some old tight place in your chest loosened even slightly while you said that, then go to the comments below and simply type the words, "It's done." Let those two words be your seal on what you just assumed. Not a wish, not a hope, a settled fact you are quietly claiming for yourself. The first key is this: stop watching your bank balance and start watching your assumption. Because Neville Goddard taught that you never rise above the level of your self-concept. And if your self-concept is the person who is always a little short, always waiting, always calculating what you cannot afford, then no manner of external effort will outrun that inner definition of yourself. Picture a woman named Claire who checks her banking app 7 times a day. She is not checking it out of neutral curiosity. She is checking it the way a prisoner checks the lock on a cell door, confirming the very condition she fears. And every time the balance disappoints her, the feeling of lack deepens. And that deepened feeling becomes the seed for tomorrow. This is not punishment. It is simply law. The imagination she is using in that moment, the one rehearsing scarcity, is the same imagination that could just as easily be rehearsing abundance. It is not a different faculty. It is the same faculty pointed the wrong direction. And here is the part Claire never noticed. The checking never once changed the number. It only ever changed her, deepening the groove of fear a little further each time, so that by evening she had convinced herself all over again that she was a woman for whom money is scarce, and the world, ever the faithful mirror, simply agreed with her the next day. Now picture a second version of Claire, one who has heard this teaching and decided to test it quietly. She does not pretend the bill is not there. She simply stops reaching for the phone every hour to confirm her fear. Instead, in the small gaps of her day, waiting for the kettle, standing in a line, she rehearses the felt sense of ease, the loosened shoulders of someone for whom money is never truly a struggle. And within days, she notices she is calmer before she is richer, because the state always precedes the evidence. It is not the evidence that produces the state. So the first key asks you to catch yourself mid-habit, to notice the checking, the calculating, the sighing over the receipt, and gently, without force, turn the inner eye toward the feeling of money already moving toward you. Not someday, now. This is not positive thinking laid over a negative fact. It is a change of which state you are choosing to indwell, and once you see that the checking itself was the problem, you have already found the door out of it. I am no longer the one who checks in fear. I am the one who rests in knowing. The second key is this: Live from the end, not toward it. Neville Goddard taught that the imagination must dwell in the wish fulfilled rather than in the wishing, because wishing keeps the good thing forever out ahead of you, always approaching, never arriving, while living in the end places you inside the finished state right now, in your feeling, tonight, before any evidence has changed. And notice how differently these two postures feel in the body. Wishing has a lean to it, a straining forward, a kind of hunger that never quite closes, while living in the end has a settled weight to it, the weight of someone who is no longer waiting for the door because they are already standing in the room. Consider a man named Thomas who wants to clear a debt. If he spends his evenings imagining the future moment when the debt might be cleared, he is still standing outside that fulfillment, still in the posture of a beggar looking through a window, watching a warmth he has not yet been invited into. But if instead he closes his eyes and feels the specific relief of the debt already gone, the exhale in his shoulders, the lightness in his step the next morning, the ordinary way he would open his mail without flinching, he has stepped inside the house instead of staring at it from the street. And this is what living in the end means. It is not fantasy, it is rehearsal of a fact that has not yet appeared in the visible, but already exists in the invisible substance Hebrews spoke of. And here is where most people quietly slip. They treat the wish fulfilled as a mood to visit occasionally, a nice feeling to borrow for 5 minutes, and then set back down, when really, it is meant to become the very floor you stand on, the atmosphere you carry into a grocery store, into a phone call about a bill, into the ordinary hour when nothing dramatic is happening at all. Thomas does not merely feel the relief once and return to worry. He lets that felt sense season the whole evening, the way a single drop of dye colors an entire glass of water. So the discipline is simple, though not always easy. Whenever the mind drifts toward the unpaid bill, gently, without force, without scolding yourself for drifting, bring it back to the felt sense of the bill already paid. Do this evening after evening, quietly, patiently, the way you would return a wandering child's hand back into yours without irritation, and the feeling hardens into an assumption, and the assumption, sustained, becomes the fact you meet in your outer world. This is why Neville Goddard insisted that Scripture's language of dwelling was never poetic decoration. Dwelling means to live somewhere, to make your home there, not to visit and leave, and the end you are living in is not a location out ahead of you on some future calendar. It is a feeling you furnish and occupy today. I do not wait at the door of my good. I already live inside it. The third key is this: guard the state you fall asleep in, because Neville Goddard taught that the moment just before sleep, the state akin to sleep, is the most creative moment of your day. The mind grows drowsy, the critical faculty grows quiet, the arguing part of you that says, "but the account is empty," finally loosens its grip, and whatever feeling you carry into that drowsy threshold sinks down and takes root, the way a seed sinks into soft ground overnight, without anyone standing over it insisting that it grow. So ask yourself honestly, what do you usually carry to bed? If it is the running tally of what you owe, the worry about tomorrow's expenses, the rehearsal of every way money has failed you before, then you have been planting that exact seed every single night without knowing it. And the harvest the next day and the day after is only the natural fruit of that planting. This is not misfortune visiting you at random, it is simply a field responding faithfully to what was sown in it while you slept. Consider a man named Peter, an ordinary man, who for years made the same small mistake without noticing it. He would climb into bed exhausted and let his mind wander straight to the unpaid invoice sitting in his inbox. He would feel, in the dark, the exact tightness he had felt reading it that afternoon, and he would drift off, still holding that tightness in his chest, like a stone he forgot to put down. Morning after morning he woke already bracing, already tired before the day began, and he assumed this was simply what mornings were like for a man in his situation. But nothing outside him had ever demanded this. It was only the seed he kept planting at the 1 hour, when planting is easiest. Now here is the wonderful reversal. The same drowsy threshold that has been working against a man like Peter can be made to work entirely for him. And for you, picture yourself lying down tonight, And instead of replaying the day's shortages, you deliberately construct one small scene that implies the money has already come, perhaps a friend saying, "I am so glad that worked out for you," and you feel the words land, you feel the warmth in their voice, you feel your own quiet reply, and you let that little scene loop gently, softly, 3 or 4 times, the way you might hum a tune to fall asleep, not gripping it, not straining after it, just resting in it the way you would rest your head on the pillow itself. Let the imaginal act be brief, vivid, and felt as real, and then let yourself drift. Neville Goddard taught that this nightly practice, done with feeling rather than mere words, is the single most reliable way to impress an assumption upon what he called the deeper mind, the mind that does not argue, does not doubt, and simply goes to work reproducing whatever has been impressed upon it, while the reasoning mind was too drowsy to object. Notice, too, that this is not a long labor. It does not require hours of effort or a special room or a particular posture. It requires only a few unhurried minutes at the 1 hour of the day when you are already letting go of everything else. You are letting go of the day's noise anyway, so let the last thing you release be the worry, and let the last thing you hold be the feeling of the wish already fulfilled. So tonight, before you sleep, pause for a moment and pick one real, specific scene that would prove the money has already come. Not a vague feeling of wealth in general, but one particular, ordinary moment, a phone call, a glance at a balance, a simple exchange with someone who matters to you, and carry only that scene to bed with you. Let it be the last thing your senses touch before the room goes dark. Because whatever state you fall asleep in, Neville Goddard taught, is the state you tend to wake up in. And a state, held long enough at night, quietly becomes the day you actually live. The last feeling of my evening is the first fact of my morning. The fourth key is this: everyone you meet is you pushed out. Neville Goddard taught this plainly, that the people around you, the coworker who is stingy with credit, the client who is slow to pay, the relative who questions your choices, are not separate powers working against your good. They are mirrors, reflecting back to you the very assumption you are secretly holding about money and about yourself. And this is uncomfortable to hear at first, because it feels so much easier to blame the slow-paying client than to examine the assumption that produced him in your experience. But consider it gently. If you carry an inner conviction that people are reluctant to pay you what you are worth, you will meet that reluctance again and again, dressed in different faces, different names, and it will feel like proof, when really it is only an echo. Picture a man named Daniel, who freelances quietly from a small desk in his apartment, and every single client he has ever had seems, in his telling, to drag their feet on invoices. He tells the story so often that his friends have started nodding before he even finishes it, and he takes this as evidence that the world of business is simply unkind to people like him. But Neville Goddard would ask him gently, and now I ask you the same, whose world is this? Because it is not a shared, neutral marketplace out there producing slow payers at random. It is Daniel's own private world, appearing to him and to him alone in that exact shape, built entirely from the state he has been secretly living in long before any invoice was ever sent. Somewhere inside him lives a quiet, older conviction that his worth must be haggled over, that ease with money is for other people, and that conviction goes out ahead of him like a lantern, lighting up, out of every possible outcome, precisely the ones that confirm it. This is what is meant when it is taught that the world is yourself pushed out. Not that other people are illusions, but that the particular version of them you keep meeting, the particular behavior they keep showing you, is being called forth by the state you occupy. So the work is never to fix the mirror, never to argue with the reflection. The work is to change what stands in front of it. When you find yourself irritated at someone over money, pause quietly and ask, what am I assuming about myself that this person is showing me? And then revise the assumption, rather than the person. Imagine Daniel doing this. Imagine him closing his eyes after a frustrating message, and instead of rehearsing the argument, feeling, simply, what it would be like to be a man whose clients pay him promptly and gladly, feeling the small satisfaction of an email that says, "Payment sent with thanks," holding that feeling until it settles, and watch, over time, how the very same marketplace begins to answer him differently. Not because the market changed, but because he did. I no longer meet reluctance. I meet people who delight in paying me well. I know it can feel tender to keep facing yourself like this, so simply stay near, subscribe now, so the next teaching finds you the moment it arrives. The fifth key is this, and it unfolds in several pieces, so stay with me through all of them, because this is the deepest turn of the whole teaching. First, consider revision. Neville Goddard taught that the day is not finished simply because the clock has moved past the events in it. If something happened today that implied lack, a bounced payment, a hard conversation about bills, a moment where you felt small because of money, you are not required to carry that scene forward into your imagination as fixed history. Instead, before sleep, replay the scene as it should have gone. Feel the better version of it as though it truly happened that way. Picture a man named Robert who receives a curt email from a landlord about a late payment. All evening, the tone of that email sits in his chest like a stone. But before he sleeps, he closes his eyes and quietly rewrites the scene. He imagines the landlord writing instead, "Thank you, all is well." No trouble at all, and he feels the small relief of that imagined line as though the screen truly showed it. He does not argue with the actual email. He simply refuses to let it be the final word inside him. This is not denial of what occurred outwardly. It is a refusal to let the outer occurrence dictate the inner assumption he carries forward. And Neville Goddard taught that this nightly revision, done faithfully, actually alters the trajectory of your future days, because your future is built from your assumptions, not from your unrevised memories. Second, consider the ordinary day, because this key is easiest to trust once you see it walked through hour by hour. Imagine waking at 7, and in the first few minutes before rising, instead of reaching for the phone to check messages, you rest a moment longer and simply feel, quietly, the sense of ease that a well-off person carries into their morning. By 8 you are dressed, and there is a small errand, perhaps coffee, and as you hand over the money you do not flinch or calculate. You feel instead a simple, calm sufficiency. By noon, a bill arrives in the mail or the inbox, and rather than the old tightening in the stomach, you notice yourself pause, breathe, and say inwardly, "This is already handled." By 3 in the afternoon, a colleague mentions a windfall or a raise they received, and instead of the old flicker of comparison, you feel a genuine warmth, because you understand, at last, that their good is proof the substance is available, not evidence that it has run out before reaching you. By evening, you sit for a few quiet minutes and deliberately construct one small imaginal scene, brief and specific, that implies your own increase has arrived, and you carry that scene to sleep. This is one ordinary day lived from assumption rather than reaction, and there is nothing dramatic in it, no lightning, no sudden fortune landing at 3 in the afternoon, only a quiet, consistent redirecting of attention, hour after hour, away from appearances and toward the felt reality of the wish fulfilled. And Neville Goddard taught that it is precisely this ordinary, undramatic persistence, repeated day upon day, that eventually hardens into a fixed assumption, and a fixed assumption always, without exception, finds its way into visible form. Third, consider the courtroom of the mind, because Neville Goddard taught that you are always testifying to something. Every sentence you speak about your circumstances is sworn testimony given before an unseen court, and the court, being perfectly obedient, renders its verdict according to whatever you have testified. So notice what you have been swearing to, out loud, in small offhand remarks. "I never have enough, this always happens to me. Money slips through my fingers." These are not harmless complaints. They are formal statements entered into evidence against yourself, and the correction is simple, though it requires vigilance. When you catch such a sentence rising in you, do not fight it in the outer air. Do not argue with the person across from you. Simply, quietly, in your own imagination, restate the case, "I am learning that money finds me easily," and let that inward correction stand as your true testimony. Because Neville Goddard taught that you must never argue for your limitation in the world, and then expect your imagination to argue for your freedom in secret. The two contradict, and contradiction cancels itself. Choose one witness stand and speak only from it. Fourth, consider persistence itself, because this is where most people, quietly, without even noticing, abandon the practice. They assume the wish fulfilled for a day, perhaps two, feel a flicker of relief, and then, when the outer world does not immediately rearrange itself, they slide back into the old habit of checking, calculating, worrying, and in that sliding back they plant the old seed again, undoing what the new seed had barely begun to grow. Neville Goddard taught that the outer world always lags behind the inner assumption, sometimes by days, sometimes by weeks, occasionally by months, and that this lag is not evidence the method has failed. It is simply the nature of growth. No farmer digs up the seed after 3 days to check if it has become a tree. The farmer waters and waits and trusts the process that is invisible under the soil. This is exactly the trust required here. You do not need to see the money moving today in order to know, quietly and with settled certainty, that it is moving, because you have already shifted the state from which it must come. And once a state is truly assumed, truly felt as real, it is only a matter of time before the outer conforms to it. The way water always finds the low ground it was always going to fill. So persistence is not stubbornness. It is patience wearing the coat of faith. Hold the feeling. Let the calendar do what calendars do, and let the substance, already real in the unseen, find its own way into your hand. I persist gently in the feeling until the world simply agrees with me. The sixth key is this: let it, which is exactly the word tucked into tonight's title, because so much striving around money comes from a hidden refusal to let the good arrive without a fight first, as though ease itself were suspicious, as though money that comes gently could not possibly be trusted the way money that comes through struggle can be trusted. And Neville Goddard taught the opposite entirely, that the whole labor is inward, done quietly in feeling and imagination, and that once the assumption is truly settled, the outer appearance is permitted to arrive by the easiest, most natural route available. Consider a man named Daniel who spent years believing that money only ever came to him through strain, through overtime, through asking, through some small humiliation attached to the getting of it. So even after he began to practice feeling the wish fulfilled, some old part of him kept bracing for the difficult path, kept trying to guess which door the money would use, kept tensing his shoulders as if bracing to catch something heavy, and this bracing itself was a quiet refusal, a way of saying beneath his own awareness that ease could not be trusted. And Neville Goddard would say to a man like Daniel, gently, that his only true labor was ever the feeling, never the mechanism, that the imagination does not need supervision from the reasoning mind once the state has truly been assumed. So Daniel had to learn something almost embarrassingly simple. He had to learn to unclench, to let his hands rest open instead of closed, to let his evenings soften instead of straining toward proof. And slowly, without any single dramatic moment, the money began arriving through paths he never would have designed himself. An old debt repaid unexpectedly, a small refund he had forgotten he was owed, a door opening sideways instead of straight ahead, and none of it required his strategy, only his willingness to stop supervising the how. This is the quiet invitation of letting. It does not mean passivity, it does not mean idleness, it simply means you stop gripping the outcome the way a child grips a toy for fear it will be taken, because the wish, once truly felt as fulfilled, is already moving toward you along its own current, the way water moves toward the sea without needing instruction on which valley to follow. So tonight, let the grip loosen a little further than it did last night. Let the shoulders drop, let the breath lengthen, let the mind stop asking which door, and rest instead in the simple certainty that a door is already opening, because that ease itself is the proof you have finally believed the thing you have been practicing all along. I let it come easily. I let it come now. Here is the whole picture. It is not the world that must change first. It is the self-concept that must change first. It is not the checking of accounts that brings money closer. It is the quiet indwelling of the wish fulfilled that brings it closer. It is not the day that shapes the night. It is the state you fall asleep in that shapes the day. It is not other people who withhold your good. It is the assumption you have not yet revised in yourself. It is not sudden effort that finishes the work. It is patient persistence in a feeling already assumed as fact. And it is not struggle that finally lets it land in your hand. It is a simple, trusting release, 6 keys, and really only one recognition wearing 6 faces, that imagination is the only substance money has ever been made of, and that the substance is already yours. Say it once more with me, in your own quiet certainty. I am the one for whom money moves easily. I am the one who already carries the feeling of having more than enough. Imagination creates my reality. And so tonight, as you let your eyes close, remember the title of this teaching. Money is moving toward you right now. It always has been. It is simply waiting for you to stop watching the door and start living, quietly, as though it has already opened.